Thank you very much. Before I start, this is the very first time Claudia and I are presenting this paper, so any suggestions or comments you might have, we're happy to hear them, even in the lunch break. Overall, our current project deals with the parenthood effect, which is this very common finding that the earnings of women and men behave very similar up until the moment where the first child is born, which is when the earnings of the mothers drop significantly while they stay virtually unchanged for the fathers. And this motherhood penalty is particularly large in Austria and Germany, which is the focus of today's presentation. One explanation for this big gap in German-speaking countries might be that these countries have very, very long parental leave durations of mothers. What you see here, based on registered data, for Austrian fathers and mothers, is their labor market behavior before the birth of their first child. And you can see almost no difference. And this is what they look like once the first child is born. Almost no changes for the fathers. But then any color that's not dark blue here means mothers are out of the labor market. And we see that they do not recover even when this first child is 3 years old. So while there is a lot of literature on the causal effect of parental leave duration on the labor market outcomes of parents, the mechanism is still very unexplained. So why would longer parental leave have a long-term impact on the earnings of the mothers? And there's one explanation that comes up again and again and again in the papers, which is that during their time at home, mothers might lose skills. There might be human capital depreciation during long absence from work. And to the best of our knowledge, there isn't actually any paper that looked at this directly. There is some evidence, though, or there's a lot of evidence in the literature that backs up this hypothesis. First of all, we know that human capital determines labor market outcomes. So our education, our health has a positive impact on our wages, our earnings. And there is some literature now that looks at tested skills, like numeracy, literacy skills, and they also find positive returns on wages. Secondly, skills are not set in stone. It's not like we learn them at school and they don't change anymore. They can change throughout the life course. There's a plasticity in these skills. And there is one paper on Sweden that finds that time away from the job, for example, during unemployment or long sick leave, decreases these skills. And finally, there are differences in these tested skills between women and men. For example, men consistently score higher in numeracy tests. And there are two papers that we found that look at this in relation to the gender difference in wages, and they find that these differences in the skills can explain differences in the wages between women and men. So what our project wants to look at is this hypothesis, this often hypothesis that the decrease in skills explains the effect of parental leave on earnings. Is there something to it? Of course, it's not the only mechanism, but it might be an important mechanism. So what we want to look at is there an effect, first of all, of parenthood on work-related skills? And if so, is the length of parental leave an important mediator for that? And then once we've established this, we finally want to look at outcomes, like earnings, but for today, I'm really only focusing on this first channel, so the effect of parenthood on work-related skills. Why am I only focusing on this today? There is probably a reason why not so many people have looked at this yet. It's really hard to get the data for it. So this is why now we go from Austria to Germany, because Germany does have a really great panel study, the NEPS study, which includes, for a representative sample of several cohorts, the development of education and competencies over the life course. The cool thing is they have tested skills, and not only get people tested once, they get tested twice. So we do have longitudinal information on tested skills, and we can see what happened in between, whether someone had a birth or not, whether someone stayed in parental leave or not. The sample that we look at consists of about 10,000 observations that participated in both tests, that were aged 18 to 45 at the first test, which I will denote T1 from now on, and that are no younger than 18 at first birth. And you can see that the difference between the two tests can be quite long. It can be from 4 to almost 10 years, with like a mode at around 6 years. We control for those differences later on. And of those 10,000 observations, roughly that we have, around 1,400 did experience a birth between the first and the second test. More of them are women, but we also have a substantial amount of men. You might be wondering, how can we even measure something like work-related skills? I don't have so much time today to go into this, just a few words. Skills is not something we can easily observe. So what these surveys, like the NEPs usually do, they test a lot of items and they combine them in a certain way. And that way we can make inference about the skill level or the changes in skills of the participants. They usually focus on functional aspects, like skills that we need to gather further skills, like learning a new language or reading a manual for a machine. And they also focus on skills that are relevant for successful participation in the labor market and to carry out everyday tasks in a labor market context. These are precisely the type of skills that are shown to have a positive association with labor market outcomes. For today, I think it's enough if I let you know that the skill scores that come from NEPs go from roughly -4.5 to +5. Okay, so anyone with a score of 5 would have really, really high skills. And the skills that we look at are mathematical skills and reading skills, which are researched a lot. There we know that they have a positive impact on wages, but we also have information on ICT skills and scientific skills of these participants. We are not interested in the skill level. We want to make use of the longitudinal aspect of this survey, because the skill levels will probably be correlated with fertility in some way, because it's so correlated to education in the end, right? So we want to know how the skills changed between the two test points. So we are interested in delta skills, which is the difference between the second test and the first test. And here is already a first descriptive result. This is the average change between the two tests for women without a birth and for women with a birth. And we can see that indeed, the drops in skills is a bit bigger for the women that experience the birth. And the same is actually true for fathers. But bear in mind, our scale goes from like -5 to +5. So this is a really, really small effect. It's almost zero. There's not much happening here. We model this. We want to know what is the effect of a birth on these delta skills. We control for gender and education because there are ceiling effects. We know that the probability to have a decrease in skills is way higher if you already have high education or high skills. We also control for differences in formal education. What if all these people in parental leave took a lot of courses? And we control also for the number of children, migration status, which might affect your language proficiency, and other control variables. We do not only operationalize our outcome as a binary variable, as a continuous variable, but also as a binary variable that is 1 if an individual experienced a decrease in skills between the two waves, okay? And here are already our first results. The effect of birth on skill changes between the two waves. And only look at the first line here in red. For women, we find that having a birth between the two waves increases the likelihood of a skill drop and also decreases the skills, whereas we don't find significant results for the men. Again, very similar effect sizes. Even though they are significant, they are very small compared to how big the skill scores are, okay? So it's not a big drop, it's a small drop. When we look at this by domain, we have way less observations in one analysis, so our standard errors are much bigger. There's not much we can say, really. So our first conclusion is that we do find very small negative effects of motherhood on work-related skills, and we don't find the same for fathers. So this is where we looked at the first relationship between parenthood and work-related skills. But what we're really after is, we want to look at this claim that it's parental leave duration, right? And that this is linked to skills, something that you read so often in the literature. Well, here I don't have much to report yet, because in NEPS, we only have information on parental leave duration for about 600 mothers and only about 300 fathers. So that's a very, very small proportion. It's only half of the birth that we have in this sample. I ran the same model regardless, very big standard errors. But what's super curious is that we do find a negative effect of parental leave duration on the skills of fathers. This is a very selective group though. It's only 270. This is probably driven by some fathers that took very long parental leave, so I would be careful when interpreting these results. This already brings us to our limitations and outlook. We really need more data. We're currently waiting for PIAC Cycle 2 to come out. It's another big survey that tests skills, and that might actually allow us to use changes in policies, in parental leave policies, as policy experiments to analyze the effect of parental leave duration on the skill outcomes of parents, mothers and fathers. What we still have to do with this analysis is we have to deal with attrition, which is a bit of a problem even in NEPS. We do apply weights, but there are more sophisticated ways to approach this, and also with measurement errors. And we might also be able to look at changes in emotional and social skills between the two test waves, which isn't something that seems to affect wages too much, but there are small effects. So now I'm really looking forward to your comments. Thanks a lot.